Welcome to Athletes to Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, CEO and founder of Alumni Direct, and we've set out to create a platform all about helping alumni connect and through their affinity and common bonds, whether it's alumni through colleges, whether it's business alumni associations, fraternities, sororities, athletes, and creating content to help them out in their business lives and beyond. And we've created this show, Athletes to Entrepreneurs. It's all about trying to athlete transitions a big issue today, and we're trying to teach and inspire athletes that there is life after sports. So we're excited about having different types of guests on the show, whether it's athletes, coaches, inspirational speakers, all business consultants, but people who can help these athletes realize that they can have success afterwards. So tonight we're very excited. We have Coach Jim Johnson. Jim, welcome to the show tonight.
Thank you, Rob. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Jim, very interesting background, played sports growing up, played basketball, started college, and then ultimately became a basketball coach. And he's one of the winningest coaches, high school basketball coaches, over 400 victories, multiple state championships. And then he kind of transitioned. He has a great story, which we'll touch on a little bit later on. A lot of people might know you once we talk about the story, but then he's also a motivational speaker. He has a podcast, and the podcast is Young Emerging Leaders with Limitless Leadership Possibilities in this lounge. And then he's also an author. And it's funny, Jim, when I'm talking to all these guests lately, everybody writes a book. And they always say, hey, you got to write a book. For me, I know I got to do it sometime. My son's a writer, so he'll probably get one before. Maybe I can get him to ghostwrite one. But anyway, like I said, it's a fun show. And we're going to start out. The first question I always like to ask people is, tell me about growing up and playing sports and how it kind of shaped you through high school and ultimately leading into college.
Yeah, so sports was very important to me. My father was a teacher and a coach, and he was actually my high school basketball coach. So he was a pretty good athlete growing up, and I'm the oldest of 6 children, and we all got heavily involved in sports. And as I got into it, the one thing about sports is it just teaches you so many things, like discipline, the ability to work with others, teamwork. It gives you a lot of things to learn about leadership, and so there was just a lot of lessons and the drive to try to be really good at something. And I played a lot of sports growing up, and then when I got into high school, although I did play 3 sports, basketball was my love, and I spent a lot of time. I was a real junkie, and I was one of those guys shooting 300 and 400, 500 shots a day and that kind of thing. And so that, it became my love. And I went to college thinking I was going to be a great college player. And unfortunately, I ended up not only playing a little bit. So, but, I learned a lot from that too. And in fact, I take my experiences as an athlete, and I think it helped me immensely as a coach. And the reason I say that is because I had really a lot of different roles. And to give you a quick, like when I was in middle school, that's when they basically just started middle school sports in my area. And I was like the last man on the team. So I understand that role, which is not a lot of fun. Then I worked in a high school where my first year I was kind of the 6th man. And then, 2 years later, I was a starter. And then my senior year, I was the best player on the team. So, I saw those roles. And then in college, I got cut from a team. So I think all those experiences from being one of the weaker players on the team to being the best players, being in between, and then not even making team, everything helped me immensely in understanding different roles and with working with kids. Because in coaches sometimes, and that's why I think sometimes star players have trouble being coaches, because they don't understand all those other aspects that not everyone's in the star. And for me, I think it helped me a lot being in a lot of different roles.
Yeah, that's a great point. You're right, because I think probably being a star athlete, sometimes you might take it for granted. Everything kind of comes easy to you.
Yeah,
it's interesting too. I've seen. I did a lot of coaching in my youth sports. With my son, and you see some of these players, and you coach at the high school level, I'm sure saw it, where they're just these superstar kids at like 5, 6, 7 years old, running around fast. They're the best in baseball, football, basketball. And by the time they get to high school, it starts kind of petering down, and then it's either they kind of max out at their talent, or the other thing you might see too is they just get burned out. So it's interesting. So did you have a dream of being a professional athlete? I'm assuming if so, was it being a professional basketball player?
Yes, I definitely, growing up and as I got better as a player, that certainly was a dream of mine. And, certainly that dream didn't come true, but I guess the next best thing was the opportunity to be a coach where I could, help impact young people.
Yeah, it's I always joke around about this too. I was like, yeah, I wanted to be a professional athlete, but a major league baseball player, but unfortunately the talent was not there. So
Yeah, yeah.
I'm doing podcasts now and running companies, right?
We all
So
adjust to make things happen. So
yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we talked about leading up into college, and then ultimately basketball. What kinds of things are you seeing? I mentioned in the start of the show, athlete transition is a major issue today, and whether it's at the high school level, the college level, or somebody after playing professional sports. So tell me kind of your thoughts on that, especially I guess. And maybe start because you did coach high school, like talk about that and the players and maybe their transition to either being done with sports or at least into college and beyond.
yeah. So I think one of the things that helped me a lot, especially when I started to really study how to become a better leader and trying to develop my players to be leaders, is, I think our program became attractive because I was more than just a guy that wanted to win basketball games. Of course, as a coach, you want to win. Don't, anybody tells you that as a coach and says they don't want to win, they're lying to you. It's like people that say, I don't care about money. Yeah, you do. So, money's important. I mean, it's not the old and now, but so going back to my point is what I did is I started really focusing on trying to, like our theme or team mission was to develop our players to be winners on and off the court. And that was something that we try to do on a daily basis by sharing life lessons, talking about, overcoming adversity and the fact that, and I was pretty direct with them. I said, you know what, I hope you all have a big dream to, play at the highest level. But I also, you should have other opportunities, other interests, because the facts are that less than 1% of the country plays Division I basketball, let alone playing in the NBA. So, I think it's good to encourage kids to be the best they can be, because I think they can learn when they really make commitments to things that they can then change, whatever thing they end up in life, whether, it's certainly if it's not professional sports, and in most cases it's not, but they can learn the things from sports that they can implement in their life, like having the discipline of showing up on time and having a great work ethic and how to work with people. Those are all great lessons that you learn by playing in sports, especially team sports, although, individual sports, you learn a lot of good things as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So there's a lot of camaraderie in sports, and you get the teams, and I guess looking at from Alumni Direct, we're looking to help alumni, and like I mentioned earlier, alumni can be a lot of different things. So how did I guess in your experience with college and maybe even high school for that matter, was there alumni involvement? And I know it's things are changing over time. I mean, alumni involvement that sometimes meant different things that weren't allowed, financial, but I'm just talking more about alumni maybe mentoring or helping these athletes or students in general getting to that, whether it's that job or that business. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I think the big thing for us is that we really wanted to make, and my last job at Greece Athena High School, I was there for 20 years. So we really built a very good tradition there. And, we really tried to embrace our players that after they left high school, that we wanted them to come back and visit us, and come to a practice or, go to a game. I meet former players like after practice and just, shoot the ball with them, see how they're doing. So I think there's a really important thing when you're developing, any kind of athletic program, is they being welcome that, once they leave your program, they're still part of you, and that I'm always there to help you anywhere I can. And, that I really try to stay in touch with players and really, help them as much as I can, even after they leave high school, that they're part of us. And, we really try to make them feel important in the fact that we wanted them to come back. And, and it was great to see them and being excited. Some of our players came to a practice or came to a game or, any type of event like that is really powerful. And I think that's something that is really important. I believe is as important, if not more important, in the college level, and keeping those connections and helping people after they leave your program, I think can be a great reflection on how good your program is.
Yeah. And you always talk about, you hear people like from a networking connecting. I mean, somebody, they went to an Ivy League school, obviously, some of the larger schools, and even, being an athlete, like people kind of know how to networking and connect. But what you just talked about is awesome, because I think it'd be nice to see more schools, because I've heard both sides of it. I was talking to an agent, and she's talking about one of her players, and he wanted to go back. He was an NFL player, wanted to go back to his school, and they were kind of hesitant, which I don't really understand. That might have been a few years back. And now, another side of it, I was talking to another guy. He played football at Richmond. He was one of our guests on the show, and they've hired somebody to kind of be that liaison for alumni and the athletes, to kind of bring it back. So I think it's important to teach these people, these athletes and students, what's next for them.
Right. I think also in situations like athletics, where you're a head coach like I was for a long time, that I think by looking out for your players, like I would send players out for recommendations to get them in colleges, or send recommendations when they were out playing for jobs or calling people in the community, because I built a good reputation. And that's something I think is really important. And once they leave your door, in my case as a senior in high school, doesn't mean that we end our relationship. I think that's really a powerful thing. And I like what you're doing with Alumni Direct, because I think the power of still having that connection, because you were part of the same college or same high school or a high school basketball program, I think it is really important.
Yeah, it's just that affinity. I was talking about, like, if I was interviewing people for a job and I had like 5 candidates, all same credentials, but one went to University of Delaware, I went, I'd probably hire the Delaware person. So I hope more of that is being done, because as we talk about this whole issue of transition for athletes, is that if more and more coaches had the kind of like what you're talking about, had your attitude. Because I think some of the bigger schools, I guess, you hear just different stories about the money driving through college athletics. Now that kind of leads me into my next question. I kind of brought it up beforehand, but NIL is a big thing now, and it's interesting. We talked before the show of just not only at the college level, but in some cases now to the high school level. So kind of give me your thoughts of NIL and name, image, likeness, for folks out there that don't know that, and now how college and high school athletes can basically promote their brand for being paid for it.
Yeah, I have very mixed emotions, because I do believe to a certain degree, when you get into college, where you're now becoming a young adult, I think the opportunity to, because you're a terrific football player or basketball player, whatever, that you can make some money. I'm just worried, though, where is that going to go? Because I think some colleges, from what I'm seeing, are taking advantage and promising that people are going to come to our school to play football or basketball, whatever. You're going to make all this extra money, and I am concerned. We're in a free country, so it's nice to be able to make some money because you have success, right? But at the same time, I'm in our area, we don't have much with high school kids yet. Now, I'm not saying that couldn't happen. I mean, we've had some pros come out of Rochester, but I think there's other places in the country where it's bigger. And but I did see that even in our area with guys kind of getting paid a little bit on the table to play for this AAU team as opposed to another AAU team. And so that's a very tricky subject that I'm just I'm apprehensive about it, because I think it could go the wrong way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to one former NFL player on the show, and I asked him about it, and he was like happy for it, like you're saying, to have these athletes get a chance. But his concern came kind of like you've got these young adults, and again, this doesn't have to be an athlete, it could be any young adult, but all of a sudden they're coming into potentially a windfall of money and they don't know what to do with it. They don't understand they got to pay taxes and different things like that. So I think if there's ways, and this is some of the thing I'm trying to do with Alumni Direct, is we're trying to partner with some of these different organizations that are, working with athletes, whether it's at the collegiate level or beyond, and having the resources to maybe teach, these kids that, here's how to manage your money properly and all that. Because a lot of them, I think we go through life, and I'm sure you can attest to this, especially coaching, that it's almost like not 24/7, but there's just so much time and effort putting into practicing and playing, that they're not getting that, education of that stuff.
Right. Yeah, it's a really important point. And I think, it's like everything in life, there's a perspective and a balance. And, if it gets way out of balance, it could create some real big issues. And so I think that's important that, you keep these young people, and you say something really important is that they need the education when they handle, because you're an 18, 19-year-old kid, that a lot of these kids came from not a lot of money. And then all of a sudden, you make an appearance and they pay you $50,000. It's like $50,000, you probably didn't see that in 5 years. And all of a sudden, it's in your hand at one time. So I think that's where I think we need to help young people with the education piece of, handling, the finances, and also handling the fact that I've studied leadership a long time, and I think there's two keys, and they don't appear to go together, but I really do believe the best people they're confident, but they also are humble. And I think those are things that, sometimes when you get a windfall of money, that humble kind of goes out the window. So
Yeah. This is, I never thought about this until I was asking a question to one of these athletes, but as a coach, and when your coaching career was over, and we're going to get into all the fun things you're doing today, but was there any challenge for you in transitioning? I mean, you've spent all these years coaching, now all of a sudden it's gone, so to speak. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, the first year was extremely difficult because you know what, I left a program that was in great shape. I didn't leave when the cover was bare. I mean, we had made the finals of our sectional tournament 4 straight years. We had won 3. We lost my last year. And then my assistant took over and they made the finals 3 more straight years. So, I mean, so the talent I didn't leave the talent bare. So, and you see sometimes guys get out because they have nothing there, so, but that wasn't the case for me. I was ready to make a transition to some of the other things that, it sounds like we might talk a little bit about, speaking and that kind of thing. But, people still ask me, I've been retired from coaching for 6 years, and do I miss it? Yes, I'm always going to miss it. I miss the daily preparation, the ability to connect with young people and try to help them. And I'm competitive, so I miss the games as well. But there's some parts of it that I don't miss. I think you mentioned earlier, and I was one of those guys. I was a 24/7 guy.
Yeah.
Basketball coaching was on my mind all the time, and there is some where I say I don't know if relief is the right word, but it's not something that's gnawing at me every single day. There's other things that gnaw at me a little bit, but not like that. I had so much pride and I put so much time and energy that it was always on my mind. I just never seemed like I could relax very well.
Yeah, no, that it's hard. And I think when you start looking back at it, and I coached, like I said, the youth sports, so nowhere near the level you did, but when I kind of hung it up, I mean, and even not only like me as a coach, but even as parents, I mean, you think about the transition for parents or coaches that, here they've watched their kids all their lives and they've been all these games or dance recitals or whatever it might be.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it stops and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, what do I do with my life now?
Right.
So as you start saying, what do I do with my life now? So you decided to get into, talk more about, talk about that journey. Okay. So now you're transitioning out of coaching, and, tell us about that journey to entrepreneurial journey you've taken and some of the things that you're doing there.
Yeah, so I got into speaking. Do you want me to share just briefly of the story I was in, just to give people some idea? Is how I got into speaking? I was coaching. I've been coaching about 25 years, and I had a young man named Jason McElwain that was on the autism spectrum. Everybody calls him JMac, and he served as our team manager for 3 years. And I just really, he was a little guy at that time. He wasn't very good, but he had this huge heart. And I just really started to have a big bond with him. So to cut to the chase, his senior, he got cut from our team 3 straight years, and he came to everything, all our all season stuff. So I saw him all the time, and as I said, I just became this big bond. So I told him for his senior night, which is our final home game, I was going to give him a gift. And instead of him being our manager, he was going to be in uniform. And I ended up putting him in the game for the last 4 minutes. And he shot an air ball on his first shot, and he missed his second shot, but then he made a 3-pointer. And I thought, God must be a basketball fan. It can't get any better than this. But the amazing thing is, for the next 3 minutes, he turned into his idol, the late, great Kobe Bryant, and he starts making shot after shot. And when smoke had cleared, Robbie had scored 20 points, including 6 3-pointers. And he was our team leading scorer. And then we had not won our championship, what would you call our sectional championship. It was my 19th year in coaching, and we ended up winning it that year. And the story just exploded all over the world. And I'll fast forward, that summer, he actually was up for an ESPY. And as I mentioned, his idol was Kobe Bryant. And he was up for the ESPY for the greatest sports moment of the year. And actually, Kobe was one of the 4 finalists. He had scored 81 points in an NBA game. So Jason got a chance to meet his idol, and then he beat him out for the ESPY. So that was pretty good. And then Jason came back and helped coach with me for my last 9 years. He was out of the program for a couple of years, and then he came back. And so I was seeing him nearly every day, and that was pretty cool. So my transition is, people started to ask me about, speaking about the game and inspiring people. And I started to do it. And first I had no idea what I was doing. And then I got to the point where I started to get some coaching and started to understand. And it was neat to try and inspire people. And then, because I studied leadership so much, I started with a speech called Dreams Really Do Come True, which was an inspirational speech. And then I do another speech on leadership called Leadership Lessons from Half Court. And I do a one on teamwork and another smaller leadership one. And then actually recently I just started a new one called Who's Your JMac, which is about inclusion, and how we did different things to include him. And I do some workshops on goal setting, and I do a leadership workshop, but I'm mostly a keynote speaker. Wrote a book about it called The Coach in a Miracle. So I became an author. I co-authored it with a newspaper writer here locally. And now, as you mentioned, I do a podcast called The Limitless Leadership Lounge, which we help young and emerging leaders. That's kind of what I'm really, my focus, my life is to give back and try to help young people learn how to become better leaders and, get to leadership positions where they can handle it because they have, coaching from people like myself. And so I'm working on a second book on the same topic to try to help young and emerging leaders. So,
And are the young emerging leaders, is this like people out of high school, out of college?
so my target market is really 3 groups. So it would be high school students, college students, and then people, because I started to speak to business, especially when I developed this leadership speech. And what I saw a lot is that, if somebody did something well in the business, then they promoted them to become he or she a manager. You saw that a lot in sales, and somebody's a pretty good salesperson. All of a sudden, well, if they're a good salesperson, they should be the sales manager. But you see a lot of people fail at that because they're different skill sets. And I think that's where I really see. So when I talk about not only young people, but also people that are just starting in their first leadership position and really trying to help them understand what it is to be a leader. And that's why I talk about these 7 steps that I implemented to help me become a much better leader. And now I try to teach people to, become better leaders of themselves so they can lead others.
That's great. And so Coach talking about the whole JMac story, and I'll tell you what I was telling before, and I watched it before, and I've seen it years ago when it happened, but I did watch it again. It's very inspirational. It brought me to tears, but I think there's a good lesson there too, that I think a lot of us get caught up in life and all the different things that we these heartaches or things that we face. And and athletes, I'm sure, as we're talking about that, they face a lot of that too. I mean, the issues out there, depression and different types of abuse. But I think a story like J-Mac, to see the inspiration of a young man with with learning challenges to do what he did. And I think a lot of us need to sometimes take a step back and look at something like that and say, hey, this is, no woe me's. Look at what he did, and we need to implement that. So kind of talking about that, continuing, what advice would you give to athletes when they are done, whether it's they're done after high school, they're done after college, or they were fortunate enough to be a professional athlete? Give them advice on kind of what to look forward to next, and maybe how to take that journey to be a successful entrepreneur or business person.
But one of the things I really encourage, we've heard this, but I really encourage young people, when they finish their career from athletics, number one is, really try to think about some of the things you learned that you can implement in your life to help you in anything you do. All right, like discipline and, being a team player and leadership skills and that kind of thing. But the first thing I talk about, in my dream speech is really understanding your passion. And that's what, really was the energy that Jason brought every day, because he was so passionate about the game of basketball. He loved it. And, so I encourage young people, try different things, because you should find something that you really enjoy. You're not going to love everything about, any job you do, but you got to love it enough so that you can tolerate some of the things you don't like. There's too many people that are going in and day out, and they absolutely hate what they do. They're just trying to, survive the day so they can go on, and make enough money to survive. And that's a tough way to live life. So I think really that's why I really encourage them. And you know what, you got to try different things and see, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And then the second piece of that is you really start to find out what you really like to do is, you got to come up with a plan, start putting some goals together, have, clear about who you are, what you really want. And, I call that putting, your plans down on paper, so that you're clear about what you want. And then the big P, and this is something, again, that I admired so much about Jason, is perseverance. I coached 30 years as a head coach. I never had a player try out more than twice if they got cut. I've had a few where they got caught one year and tried the next year, but they didn't do, make a real commitment. They just kind of came out and half-hearted. That wasn't Jason. He got cut his sophomore year. He came to all our off-season workouts, tried out his junior, didn't make it. Same thing, same commitment. So he learned a lot about, overcoming and persevering. And the fact that, because I felt he deserved a chance, he gets a chance and he shines. And, I can't guarantee that's always going to happen for everybody, but I always talk about things when I talk to young people is that if you persevere and you are consistent with certain actions, I call it the law of averages. So if you, do all the right things, let's give health, for example, you exercise, you eat well, you sleep well, you know what? Chances are you're going to be a healthy person. Now, there are exceptions. There's somebody that all of a sudden, even though they take great care of themselves, dies of cancer. That does happen. But what I really try to teach young people is, you know what? You want to make the odds in your favor. And you do that by doing the right things consistently. And, as I said, there are exceptions, but, more times than not, if you do the right things, good things are going to happen to you.
That's great advice. And that's the one thing I'm doing. It's the fun part of doing this podcast, and just all the nuggets that you pick up and from the different perspectives. So that's good. So I mentioned in the beginning, kind of high level what you do, but tell us where people can find you, maybe your website. You mentioned your book, your podcast. Kind of give people insight into how to define Coach Jim here.
Sure. So the best way is my website's coachjimjohnson.com. That way I wouldn't forget it. And
That's good.
On that, I have a free newsletter that people can sign up for. I also have a free weekly blog that I do. We also have a YouTube channel. We have a YouTube channel also for our podcast, and pretty much all the information. If somebody wants a call, just to talk, a coaching call, or if somebody's interested in bringing me in to, talk to their organization with one of my presentations, certainly all that information. I do have a manager, her name is Kate, that works with me, and between the two of us, we'll take good care of you. So
That's great. I mean, you go out to those different areas. And we'll put that in the show notes as well. And you can find us on alumnidirect.com, and also on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, all those different things. And we're committed to helping alumni and just helping in this space of networking, connecting. A lot of people, unfortunately, don't know how to do that. And we're hoping that we can provide that community for people to come out and do that, and give them different resources of value. So again, thank you so much, Jim Johnson, Coach Jim, for being on the show tonight, and I look forward to talking again soon.
yeah, thanks. It was great to have you or be on your show, Rob, and I appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to growing our relationship and staying in touch.
Absolutely.